Well, hello there, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Here's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking about equations of circles. We're going to get one that's not in standard form and translate it into standard form so that we can then, just by visual, examination, we can find the center and the radius and then graph it. There is something a little tricky. There's a little bit of tricky algebra in here, completing the square. Now, hopefully you remember that from Algebra 1 or Algebra 2. Maybe you don't. I don't know. We're going to go over it today, and hopefully it'll make it kind of easy for you. Here, let's get to it, shall we? So first of all, the instructions might look something like this. It says write the equation of the circle in standard form, then identify the center and the radius. And it might also say graph it. Also, it might just say, it actually might not even give you this first sentence right here. When you're here's what I'm trying to get you guys to understand. Let's say you're taking a quiz or a test, especially something like a final exam, and you're not sure what to do. You got to read the instructions. And a lot of times people don't pay attention to the instructions. They just follow the procedures and they think, oh, I'm going to be good to go. Well, look, check this out. If this part that's highlighted wasn't even there and it just said identify the center and the radius, or even if it just said, let's just say it said to graph the equation and it didn't tell you it was a circle, you should still know that this is what you have to do first. Okay, so let's see here. Let's start with this one. X squared plus y squared, 2x plus 6y plus 6 equals 0. Now, we need to write this in standard form. This is not currently in standard form. Do you see? This is not standard form. Standard form, if you remember, I'll write it over here on the side, is x minus h squared plus, let's see here, y minus k squared equals r squared, where the center is the opposite sign of h and the opposite sign of k, that would be the center, and the radius is r, right? So whatever the square root of that number is, that's the radius. That's the r is equal to r, right? The radius is equal to the radius, right? So this is not in standard form. So we need to change this to look like this. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to do a little bit of rearranging first. Okay, so first, here, we're going to rearrange it, and you want to leave a bunch of space, and I'll show you where to use the space and I'll explain why. So x squared plus 2x, leave some space, plus y squared plus 6y, leave some space, equals negative 6. So here's what we did, right? Here's what we did. We just, we swapped these two, and we left some space in there, right? And then we did the inverse of that to move it to the other side. Okay, so we took this number, subtracted 6 from both sides. That's how we got the negative 6 over here. What you do to one side, you do the same to the other, and it works. And that actually is going to come into play when we're talking about completing the square. What you do to one side of an equation, you have to do the other side, or you'll invalidate that equality, right? So these two things are equal. This thing here equals 0. So there's values of x and y that make this true. So in order to keep this true, if we do to one side, we have to do the other. Okay, so now what we're going to have to do is we have to figure out, we have to factor this so that we have this is actually right here, if you remember, this is a perfect square. So we have to make this into a perfect square. Now, check this out. This is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing completing the square to factor. That's what we're going to do. That's the hard part right there. We're going to end up having to complete the square for this in order to factor it. So let's quickly review completing the square. So now, first of all, a square is a number times itself, right? So like, let's say we had x plus 5 squared. Do you remember this would be like this? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a couple of these right here on the paper for you. And as I'm writing them, I want you to see if you can figure out the pattern, because there is a pattern that we're going to make use of to complete the square. All right, let's do one more. Let's do 7. Yeah, why not? Okay. So, do you see the pattern? Give yourself a minute. Take a minute. Look at this. Check this out. Do you see? Sorry, I bumped the microphone there. I don't know how loud that'll be for you guys. Do you see? I'll turn on a little extra light for you here, maybe. There we go. I don't know if that helps. Yeah, all right. Anyway, do you see the pattern? Do you see a pattern? There's a relationship in all of these between b and c. There's a relationship. Now remember, this is ax squared plus bx plus c. There's a relationship for each and every one of these between b and c. Here's the relationship. If you take half of b and you square it, it's equal to c. That's true for every single one of these. And that's kind of the key idea. If you take half of b and you square it, you get c. So for example, if I took half of 10, that gives you 5, and I squared it, I'd get 25. If I take half of negative 6, that's negative 3, and I square it, I get positive 9. Do you see? So like, for example, let's do this right here. What if I gave you this? Let's say this was a perfect square. What value would have to go there? What value would have to go there? Half of what? So here's what you'd have to ask yourself. Half of what squared is 64? Half of what squared is 64? Well, isn't half of 8 squared? Or sorry, half of 16 squared 8, and 8 squared is 64. So this would have to be a 16. Do you see? Yeah, that's how it works. Now, what if I gave you something like this? Let me think of a good one right here. Let me think of a good one. So let's say 20x plus, what number would go there if this was a perfect square? If I completed the square right here, what number would have to go here? Well, the way we're going to figure that out is we're going to take half of b, so that's negative 20 over 2, and I have to square it, and that's what number would go right there. Well, that'd be 100, wouldn't it? That's basically completing the square. Now, these aren't equations. These are just, some expressions. But what if you had something like this? What if you had x squared? Let's use this one. X squared minus 20x. Let's see, plus 5 equals 0. And you wanted to complete the square. Let's say you were told to complete the square for this. So let's run through this one right here, right? So here's what we're going to do first. What we're going to do is we're going to rewrite it. We're going to leave space. We're going to move that 5 to the other side. Okay, and we're going to make this a perfect square. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take half of that number and square it. Do you see? So we did. Half of this number is negative 10, and we square it. And then what we do to one side, we have to do the same thing to the other. Now, here's the deal. And I'm not going through this very slowly because this should be, probably isn't for some of you, but it should be review. This should be like, oh yeah, I remember why. Check this out. You don't square it here and you write it with the sign, because this is when you factor this expression, that value right there is going to be right here every time. And so that would be 95. Do you see? That's completing the square. Now, we squared it over here. We didn't square it over here. But if you look, we added the same thing to both sides. That way it still stays equal. These two equations, 100% the same. Yeah. So, all right. So that's kind of how completing the square works. This right here, you don't square it, you write the sign, because it's going to help you. It makes it easy. Because otherwise, if you write it out, then you have to factor it, and sometimes it's not that easy. Let me show you one more example. Let's say we had x squared plus, let's say 3x. Let's say minus 7 equals 0, and we were going to, oops, sorry, there we go. Let's say we were going to complete the square, CTS, complete the square for this. So last example of this one, we're going to move the 7 to the other side, okay? Now, what we've got to do, we have to make this a perfect square, half of b squared has to be c. C, in a perfect square, c is going to be equal to half of b squared. Half of b squared will be equal to c. For a perfect square quadratic. For a perfect square quadratic, c is going to be half of b squared. You see? Remember? Half of b squared, half of 10 is 5, 5 squared is 25. Half of negative 6 is negative 3, negative 3 squared is 9. Do you see? Every single time the same. So that's what we've got to do here. The hard thing about this one is this is odd. It's not an even number. So when you take half of it, you end up with a fraction. But it's positive, so that's not so bad. So here's what we're going to do. Half of b squared. Over here, I added it to the left. It means I also have to add it to the right. But over here, I'm going to go ahead and square it. Now, when I factor it, the reason I don't actually square it on this side is that number goes there every single time, just like it did right here. Every single time. Now here, I'm sure that if you were given this, you could factor that and you could say, oh, well, that's -10 and -10, right? So you'd be okay. But this one would be a little different. Like if you were asked to factor x squared plus 3x plus 9 over 4, it would be hard to figure out what multiplies to 9 over 4 and adds to 3. Well, that's 3 over 2. 3 over 2 times itself is 9 over 4. 3 over 2 plus 3 over 2 is 3. Yeah, watch. See, look, 3 over 2 times 3 over 2. Well, that's obviously equal to 9 over 4, but 3 over 2 plus 3 over 2, whoa, is equal to 6 over 2, which is 3. Do you see? That'd be hard to figure out if you squared this. If you squared this number to get 9 over 4, it'd be difficult to figure out. That's why we do it this way. All right. Now over here, we have to get a common denominator. These fractions are easy. You just got to make them easy. Like, look, see that 7? It's the same as 7 over 1. We need a common denominator of 4. 7 is the same as 28 over 4. 7 is the same as 28 over 4. 28 divided by 4 is 7. And now I have a common denominator. So 37 over 4. And that's it. So that's what we have to do here. Now, the examples we're doing are a little easier than this one. This is about as most, you could have like one level more of difficulty, but that's the general idea. All right, so now, sorry, I hit the microphone again. Dang, I hope it wasn't loud. Okay, so now we're going to do that here. We have to do it with the x, and we have to do it with the y. We have to complete the square 2 times. So what I have to do here is I have to make this a perfect square. And the way I do that, remember, c is going to be equal to half of b squared. So we're going to complete the square. Half of 2 is 1, right? Now, I added it to the left side of this equation, so I also have to add it to the right. Now let's do the same thing here. Half of 6 is 3. I added it to the left, I add it to the right. Over here, I don't square it. On the left, I don't square it because my next step is to factor. Over here on the right, I do square it because I'm going to combine like terms. So this is x plus 1 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals, that's just 4. Do you see? So that's standard form right there. Now the center is going to be, remember, don't mess this up, -1, -3. Those signs are backwards. And the radius is going to be 2. Remember, it's the square root of this. This is the radius squared. That number in standard form, when the circle's written in standard form, that number right there is the radius squared. Okay? So let me give you an example. You try it. Pause the video when you're done. And then we'll walk through it, okay? So here's the example. I believe it's the same level of complexity as the previous. But you try this one. Pause the video. When you're done, actually, let me tell you this. Try this one, but if you get stuck, don't watch the rest of the video. Rewind it and watch what we did the first time. Especially practice some of those completing the square things, right? So practice completing the square a little bit. Because if you're getting stuck on that, you've got to learn that. If that completing the square is like the barrier for you, preventing you from being able to do this, you need to go back and review some of that stuff, some of completing the square. I'll put some links in the description of this video so that you can find some help on that. It's really not that difficult. It's a little strange. It's a little unusual, but if with a little bit of practice, I know you guys can get it, and then this will be accessible. It won't be that hard, okay? So I'm going to start it now. So pause the video if you haven't finished it yet. All right, so now x squared, that's why you use pencils. X squared minus 4x. I use a pen in the videos because it's easier to see. Okay, so here's what we did, right? We swapped these two, basically. So I can have the x's combined, I have the y's together over here, and then I move the constant term to the other side, right? So now I have to complete the square. So I have to take half of 4. Be careful. Make sure you have that sign there. Make sure you have that sign. If you mess up the sign, write yourself a note. Make sure that sign's there. Oh, I didn't leave myself enough room over here. What a loser. My mom's right about me. So plus -3 squared. I'm going to rewrite that, okay? So I apologize for that being all nice and ugly. So here's what you should end up with. Okay, now what I haven't done yet is I haven't added these numbers to the other side. This number here and this number over here. Right? I just did the completing of the square. Now, I have to add 4 and I have to add 9. I think. Hold on, let me make sure. So half of 4 squared is 2, right? Okay. Half of 6 squared is 3. Half of 6 is 3, and then I square it. Half of 4 is 2. Yeah, so that's good. Okay, and then I added them over here. Yeah. Okay, so we're doing good. So now let's complete the square. This is going to be x minus 2 squared. Remember, that sign. That's why you write the sign, and that number goes with it. The reason you write the sign is this is going to be a negative. And then plus y minus 3 squared equals, let's see, that's 16 plus 9. Isn't that 25? I hope so. All right, so now our center of this circle is going to be 2, 3, and the radius, cinco distinto. Hope it's been helpful. Man, you guys can handle this. If you need a little extra help with completing the square, that's something you can learn. You might have to take responsibility on yourself, for yourself on your own, and go do that. But that's the way it works. Like if you find that you have a task at hand that you're responsible for, it's not the teacher's job to make sure you fix things like that. It might not even be your fault you don't know this. Maybe your teacher in the past never taught it to you, but it's your responsibility to learn it now. So I'll provide you guys with some links in the description, some videos you can watch. I think there's probably some stuff on Khan Academy where you can practice these problems and get feedback as you go if you make mistakes. I'll look for that, and I'll put all that stuff in the description for you, okay? Hope you guys are having a great day, and I will see you guys soon. Be safe, and I don't know, go eat some ice cream, go for a walk. Both of those things, right?